Welcome to episode 174 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, so the word all spelled out, seven.health.com/174.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. So this week on the show, it's another guest interview, and I'm chatting with Aaron Flores. So Aaron is a registered dietitian nutritionist based out of Los Angeles, California. With over 10 years of experience, Aaron has worked with eating disorders in a variety of settings. He currently works part-time at Center for Discovery and part-time in his private practice in Calabasas, California. He is a certified body trust provider, and his main area of focus are intuitive eating and health at every size. In his work, Aaron helps individuals learn how to make peace with food and develop body positive behaviors. Aaron is a frequent speaker and has presented at the 2016 and 2017 Binge Eating Disorder Awareness Annual Conference, the 2018-2019 International Conference of Eating Disorders, and the 2018 Association for Size Diversity and Health Conference. Along with his work with eating disorders, he is also a co-host of the podcast Dietitians Unplugged. So I've been aware of Aaron for a number of years. So the podcast that he hosts, Dietitians Unplugged, started, I think, a couple of months after Real Health Radio. So it's been running for over 4 years. And I think I discovered it fairly early on. So yeah, this is obviously long overdue. And as part of this episode, we talk about how Aaron got into being a dietitian. So this is actually a second career and something he didn't begin until his early 30s, so not the usual trajectory for a lot of guests on the show. Aaron originally started out helping with the VA and doing a weight loss program with them. So his views have radically shifted since then. So we talk about this journey for him being exposed to health at every size and intuitive eating and how he's changed over the years. We talk about the body trust training that Aaron has done and why he's found it so beneficial. So this is actually a training that I'm personally wanting to do, and so I selfishly got to ask Aaron a lot of questions and pick his brains about this. And as a side note, I've interviewed Dana Sturdivant, who is the co-creator or one of the co-creators of the training. It's episode 149 if you want to check it out. With Aaron, we talk about male body image. So this isn't a topic I've covered much on the show, and knowing what Aaron works with and knowing that he works with a lot of men and also runs a group coaching that is specifically aimed for men, I wanted to delve into this with him. And it's actually something I've started to think about more after our conversation. And there's been a couple of things that have happened that I wish I'd been able to bring up with him in the conversation, but because they've happened more recently, we didn't get a chance to speak about it. The first is that I've been going to a local swimming pool most weekends. So we're going away in January time to Thailand and Australia, and Ramsey is currently learning to swim. So he's not in official swimming lessons. We did that when he was younger, but we now just go every weekend, and I and him, we go to the pool, and he absolutely adores it. He has a grin from ear to ear the whole time. But why I'm mentioning this is because going to a pool, I'm seeing lots of bodies in swimwear. And this is a regular swimming pool out in the countryside. It's not some private members club that skews to some particular type of clientele and body type. It's like families in the pool with kids. And it's just been a really good reminder of the diversity of body shapes and sizes that are out there, and that no one looks like they are going to appear on the front cover of Men's Health, and that's okay, and that people are simply having fun with their kids. And undoubtedly there are people in that environment who probably feel body conscious or who struggle with body image, but at least as they look around, they are seeing a fair representation of what different bodies look like. The other thing that happened was that I watched the Diego Maradona documentary. So my dad was talking about this when my folks were recently over visiting and was saying how much he enjoyed it. It was directed by Asif Kapadia. I've never heard his name pronounced, so I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But he also directed Amy, all about Amy Winehouse, and then Senna, all about Ed Senna. So all three of them are fantastic documentaries and worth seeing. But what struck me about the Maradona documentary was the physique of the football players. So the majority of the film centers around the time Maradona was at Naples, which was between 1984 and 1990. And there were many scenes as part of the documentary where they would be in the locker room or people would be training. And this was particularly like in the locker room was when they won the league or when Argentina won the World Cup. And what struck me was just how regular the guys' bodies looked. Like they were clearly fit and could play a 90-minute game of football, but they didn't look ripped. Like you now compare this to Cristiano Ronaldo or many of the other footballers today, and the physique and the aesthetic has completely changed. And in a 30-year time span, what a top-class footballer looks like has drastically changed. And I just think that this is interesting because this has a trickle-down effect on the perception of what a body should look like and our perception today versus what it was 30 years ago seems to me to be so drastically different. And it also reminded me of a scene from the documentary Bigger, Faster, Stronger, which is also really great and also worth a watch. But as part of that, there's a scene where they look at the original G.I. Joe from the 1960s and then kind of walk their way through all the way up to present day, and just how much over time they got sort of more and more ripped and bigger and more muscle definition, ending to something most recently that it just defies anything that the human body could ever look like. And again, that this just starts to get normalized. And anyway, I just wanted to mention all this here because it was stuff that I wish I could have had a chance to speak to Aaron about in our conversation, but just didn't get a chance to. The final thing that we cover as part of our conversation is a support group that Aaron has set up for eating disorder clinicians who are struggling with their own issues around food. And from hearing about this and talking with Aaron about it, it's something that I've realized is really needed, and I'm glad that he's doing that work. So this has been a rather extended intro. So let's get on with this. Here is my conversation with Aaron Flores. Hey, Aaron, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Chris, thanks for having me.
So I am a big fan of your podcast, Dietitians Unplugged, that you host with Glennis. I'm actually recording an episode with her next week. So it'll be great to have
that's great.
Both of you on the show. There's a lot I want to talk about today. I mean, there's two areas I really want to hit, and I hope we can spend a bit of time on them. One is your body trust certification and just chatting around that and what you got out of it and how that's helped you as a practitioner. And then the second topic is on men and body image and eating disorders. I don't work with a lot of male clients, and it's not a topic I've covered in any level of depth on the show. And given what I've heard you talk about before, and I know what you do, you are definitely the right person to fill that void. So they're two of the big areas, and then we can just go in all of the other directions and see what happens.
Great.
So, to start with, do you want to give listeners a bit of background on yourself, a brief bio, who you are, what training you've done, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So I'm based out of LA, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I've finished that in like 2006. So it's been about 12 or 13 years since I've been a dietitian. It's my career change. So I came from a previous career of internet game development. So I was like full in on the .com boom and trying to reap the rewards of that, and it just did not go well, and I was quite miserable in that work anyway. So I went back to school at 30 to do this, to become a dietitian. And since then, I've worked in a variety of settings. I started my career working at the Veterans Administration, so working with veterans here in the U.S. and helping with their healthcare. It's interesting because where I am now is so different from where I started. But back then, I was actually working with and then eventually running a weight loss program within the VA. And so I did that for a few amount of years and tried to straddle some paradigms with health at every size and weight loss for quite some time, and finally just had to push over fully into working from this sort of more weight inclusive space because I just couldn't do it anymore. And I realized I was actually doing more harm to the clients, to the vets than anyone else. Cause they were like, I don't get this, you're not really sort of congruent with what you're talking about and what this program is about. And I'm confused. I don't know what I should do. And it was actually where I first learned about binge eating disorder, because all these veterans who were coming in for weight loss, had trauma history. Yeah. They had been weight cycling for years, and food was one of their main coping tools. And a lot of them had developed eating disorders because of it. And so through that experience and then some other and like reading intuitive eating and things like that, I really just decided I need to do something totally different. And so I started to work mainly with eating disorders, and I started doing that, and then I became a certified body trust provider, like you mentioned. Yeah. And that's a certification that I received through Hillary Canavy and Dana Sturdivant in Portland, Oregon, and they own a company called Be Nourished. And that is basically a year-long training that I went through. Most of it's online, but you do a lot of sort of in-person work as well and it focuses around the principles that were already sort of foundational to me: intuitive eating, health at every size. But it added a really deep weight stigma component, a really strong social justice component to it. And a lot of feminist theory of therapy, a lot of trauma-informed care nuances, things that I, as a dietitian, had never been trained with. Yeah. And that singularly really was one of the best things I've done professionally, because it really allowed me to think about not only how I work with my clients, right, but how I show up in the room as well. And so between all that, those, the work as a dietitian, the body trust certification, I've really just sort of carved out a space within this eating disorder community to really address those things. And I work with all different sorts of clients. I work with men, I work with women, I work with, folks all over the gender spectrum, adolescents, adults. And I work with, eating, I work with binge eating disorder, anorexia. I work with all the eating disorders, but it's really been quite like a career transformation over the past 12 years. But I find I'm much happier now than I was back then at the VA.
Yeah. And so like that transition at age 30, how did you make the decision of like, I want to do dietetics, I want to study as a dietitian?
Yeah, well, I would be curious, right, if we asked every dietitian why they became a dietitian, if they have a similar answer to mine. But really, it was because I had my own stuff with food. I had struggled with weight and eating pretty much all my adult life up till then, for sure. And not all of my childhood, but a good amount of my childhood. And when I went to become a dietitian, I was in the middle of a lot of dieting behavior, a lot of restrictive eating, a lot of obsessive exercise. I was never diagnosed, but it probably looked a lot like an eating disorder. Yeah. And I went back to school really in that mindset and in the throes of those behaviors with the goal of trying. I said to myself, and I said to my partner, I said, we weren't married yet. And I told her, I think I'm going to go back to school, because if I can lose weight, everyone can. And I'm going to be Richard Simmons, right? I'm going to be the new Richard Simmons, and I'm going to like coach people, because there aren't any men who are doing this. So like, I really came at this career focused on helping people lose weight.
And so was it a time when you were sort of winning that battle? And I say winning in inverted commas.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yes. I felt like I was winning, and in reality, I was miserable. When I look back on it now, the food I ate was sad. The rules and the sort of, like limits I set on myself around food were strict and rigid. I ate the same lunch for years, and justified it in many different ways, but really it came down to, it was low calorie, and it took a lot of work through school and even after, as a dietitian, to sort of undo a lot of that and build a more sustainable relationship with food. And yes, I was definitely like in it. I think it's a good way to put it. I thought I was winning for sure.
Yeah. And so you said some of this started from childhood. So how far back are we going?
I remember from a very, I would say like, around like puberty for me, like I really noticed that my body was a little bit different from my friends. I was athletic and I played sports, and I was, moderately good at them. I wasn't going to go pro, but I could hold my own, but my body never sort of developed, at least from a masculinity standpoint, right, the way I thought it should. It didn't develop muscles the way it should. And so I remember around 15, my mother asked if I wanted to go see a dietitian, and it was someone that she had seen that had helped her lose weight. And she, we sort of, I don't know if I had voiced concern, but she obviously had some concerns about the size of my body and my relationship with food then. And so at 15, I went to see a dietitian, and I hated all of it. I consented to go, it wasn't like pulling teeth, but like once I was there, I was like, what am I doing here? And like, I didn't do anything she said. I lied on my food journal, and I would like, she had me self-report my weight. So I just sort of told her I lost a half pound every week. And really that was it. And I didn't really do anything that she really told me to do. I sort of saved that until I went to college, and after college, because when I went away to school, all the food rules were gone, and I got to eat however I wanted. And I did. And just like anyone who's been sort of or had some restrictions, or whether they were like sort of family imposed or self-imposed, you sort of swing to the other side, and I swung to the other side. And I gained weight during that process. And it wasn't until in my mid-20s that I applied all of the things that this dietitian taught me when I was 15 into my life. And that's what really started like this really intense dieting, restrictive eating behavior cycle.
Right. And when I think about 15-year-olds, it's much more associated with women or girls going on diet. So how common was it with your male counterparts doing that? Or was part of the reason you didn't follow any of it because you're like, this just feels so different to what everyone else is having to do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't think I ever talked about it with any of my friends. Like, I don't think it ever came up. I don't think I put it this way. If I don't think it came up, that means I must have felt embarrassed about it, and I wasn't going to say anything to them. And so I don't think this is something that we ever talked about, like not once, about like dieting or anything like that. I do remember at some point, like as I played like high school volleyball, that there were some conversations around like eating for like performance, but it wasn't like anything like structured, or it was more like sort of almost laughing about like carb loading, right, for a volleyball match, which you don't need, right? But I think that's where it might have come in a little bit, but it didn't. But it wasn't really anything I spoke about or anything my friends talked about at all.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you're older than me, but the rhetoric of what was talked about with diets when you and I were at school is very different to how things are talked about now.
I'm sure. Yeah. I think dieting is probably more entrenched in our culture right now. And maybe I'm biased because I see it, this is my work. But I see it entrenched in a much different and much more pervasive way than when I was a kid. But again, that was, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. And you mentioned about your mom being the one who took you or recommended you going to the dietitian. Are you like, what was food like in your house in terms of your parents eating and their thoughts around eating and body shape and dieting and all of that?
Well, I definitely remember my mom dieting as a kid, and I definitely remember hearing self-talk about this picture looks good, this picture doesn't. Look at me then, look at me now, type comments. So that was really important. My parents are divorced, and so I really was raised primarily by my mom from age 6 or 7 till I left for high school. So, my dad didn't, although I spent some time with him, I didn't live with him. And so I didn't notice any like diet culture from him. My mom is from the United States. My dad is from Mexico. So culturally, I think there's also some differences around food. And my mom is Jewish. My dad was raised Catholic, but is not observant, with that. And I think it added definitely some different nuances. And what I know now too is like, I think each of their upbringings around food was incredibly different.
Yeah.
One came from a more food insecure home. One came from a more, food stable home. And I think those things play a role as well. So I think I felt more of that from my mom, but just because that's also, I lived with her and I was raised by her mostly.
Sure. And what about like other siblings? Like, do you have brothers, sisters in terms of body shape? If you do, are they similar to you?
Yeah. I have an older brother, and we definitely have different body types. Right. And I have more of, I definitely have my dad's body. And it's, we look alike in a lot of different ways. And I think I see my body type in him really, really clearly. And my brother's, my brother is in a smaller body than I am, and was always in a smaller body than I was when we were growing up. So that comparison piece was definitely there in my head.
Yeah. No, and part of the reason I ask that is I've got an older brother and a younger sister, and we all have very different body shapes. Like I've always been the one who's been smaller and leaner, and it's really interesting to reflect on that because none of us did anything differently. Like it was just this is how we were born into it. And yes, some people had more of a focus on food or took more pleasure from food or whatever. But again, that wasn't a choice. That was just what naturally happened. So, yeah. Yeah. And so talking about like you deciding to make that change at 30 and study as a dietitian, like how much of a big decision did that feel to you?
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. I mean, it was like, those movies where you sort of just jump off the cliff and you hope everything's going to be okay. That's what it was. I was, I had a very stable career. I was making I'd originally dropped out of college, right? In my 20s, I dropped out. I never finished. And so without a college degree, I was making fairly decent money in the internet world, doing the things I was doing. But I was miserable. Like really just miserable. I would come home on a Friday and like cry because I had to go back work on a Monday. you know.
Gosh.
And I changed jobs a bunch of times because I thought it was the place, right? I was like, oh, this place is whack, right? I'm leaving, like, and then so I'd go to another place and I'd be like, this place is crazy, just like the other one. Like, why am I here? And then I went to a career counselor a couple times. I read this book called What Color is My Parachute, which sort of like gives you all these exercises to sort of figure out what kind of things you'd be good at, you know?
Yeah.
And I sort of realized, like, I think I need to like go back to school and get my degree and become a dietitian. And I was engaged at the time. We were, you know, this was June and we were going to be married in September. And I was like, you know, I think I need to do this. And my partner was like, she was like, yeah, you should totally do this. This is, you know, it'll be, yeah, it's a change for us, but we'll do it. And I did. So it was a huge leap. It was a complete 180.
And looking back on it now, when you say you were so miserable as part of that previous job or jobs, what is it that you do now that is so much more fulfilling that wasn't there?
Yeah. Well, I think the number one thing is I work like directly with people. And so like just to sort of fast forward a little bit, like why I love the Body Trust work and the community I found through there is in my work with my clients right now, I really feel like there's two. I know this sounds weird, but like there's a humanity that shows up in the room when I do this work with folks, and that feels really good. So like the intrinsic things that I get from this work are that, you know, I get to like build these like I get to see how what we talk about in the room, it sounds corny, but it's true, like really has the potential to change and even save someone's life.
Yeah.
And that is really profound. Like I do not take that lightly at all. I also so that's number one, right? I feel like I get to like be connected to people on a daily basis. And my other career, I was not. I was like, all the effort I was putting in was for a stupid video game. and like, it was great to see like, hey, like 10,000 people played this game this week, but like, I didn't know who those 10,000 people are. Like, were they happy because I did all this work? I mean, like I was working like 60, 70 hour weeks, and was the effort worth the reward? And it wasn't. So, you know, for me, having that human connection and knowing that like the work I'm putting in has a direct effect on the person sitting across from me is really profound.
And is that what you had identified in terms of going to see the career counselor or reading the book of like, I'm just missing that humanity as part of my work?
A large part of it. Yeah. Because it was like, do I want to be the CEO of these companies? Like, so I can run them better. And that wasn't it. Right. I'm not like I wasn't like trying to be Steve Jobs or like run the company or be that person.
Yeah.
I didn't have to like own it. Right. But what I needed to feel like when I went home at night that I was making a difference in someone's life or in the world. Right. I just needed to have that sort of real world, tangible feeling that this work, the effort I'm putting in is worth it.
Yeah. Definitely. And look, what you're describing there is why I do the work that I do and why I'm also so passionate about it. But interestingly, like that wasn't what initially got me into studying nutrition and doing this. It was more of that just interest in food and interest in health and helping people. But even like the helping people, it still wasn't as deep as the way that I think about it now. But now that's the part that I like the most and why I spend the time like wanting to study so much about like how to be a better practitioner and understanding psychology and all of those components, because that's for me, that's the really interesting bit.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing this?
So I qualified in 2008. So like 11 years.
All right. So we're around the same time frame. It's interesting. The folks that I see, like who graduated with me or completed their coursework around me or or became dietitians around the time I did, a lot of them were younger. And it's interesting because some of them have sort of had that same epiphany I had. Like I just, and like you said, like I just came into this because I liked food and sort of like this, but I didn't find the passion that was going to like keep me going in this career. And a lot of those folks have changed careers now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, while there may have been some worry about coming into this career later in life, there's a lot that I've learned through just being older that helps me so much in terms of the work that I do, that you don't learn in a textbook, that you just have to go through in terms of experience, whether that be like becoming a parent or just getting older and things that happen in life, that you would have then been able to funnel into the work that you do with people.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I was 30. And when I really, for the most part, I was married during most of it. And I treated school like my job. You know, yeah. It was, I was going to go to school religiously. I was going to, study like it was my job, and I was going to commit like it was my job. And, even if I just had class for 2 hours a day, that doesn't mean I did 2 hours of work. I put in like a full day's work. Because I felt like I had the maturity to do that. And when I went to school the first time, it was not that way at all. I mean, I was the worst student ever. I would sign up for a class and go twice and then never go again.
Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons. But basically, it was because I was not ready to go to school. I mean, to college. I didn't know what I wanted. I had no direction, and I fumbled through all of it. So I get what you're saying completely. Like there is a part of this where maturity and age is a factor in it.
Definitely. And in terms of picking dietetics, are you a sciencey kid? Had that always been an interest for you?
Yeah, no, not really. I remember high school chemistry. I failed and had to redo in summer school. And it's not because I didn't get it. It's just because I didn't apply. I didn't work at it. Right. But when I went back to school, when I first started university, when I was 18, I was a history major, and I thought that was going to be really interesting, and it was. But I'm definitely more sciencey than I thought. And when I went back to school at 30, I loved chemistry. Like I just I loved it so much that I ended up tutoring people. And even today, like stoichiometry, like I love stoichiometry, like doing all those equations, like is so much fun to me. And my kids are just learning algebra, and I'm like the happiest dad in the world, like helping them with algebra homework. Nice.
And so you talked about when you were working with the veterans, and you kind of developing this ambivalence around the work that you were doing, and having just these mixed ideas about what's right, what should you be doing. So was that coming more from your own personal journey, or just the results that you were seeing with the guys that you're working with?
It was less about my own personal stuff and more about what I was seeing, but also that's around the time I had read Intuitive Eating and was sort of like really sort of then understanding what some of this stuff is about. And like this, when I say this stuff, I mean like a more weight inclusive approach. And I was really starting to understand more about what it would mean to apply that both personally, but also professionally. And so, it was a bunch of things that sort of came together as and like in this space of like, these folks are coming in, they're doing the best they can, but the number on the scale doesn't change. And they're showing up really despondent.
Yeah.
And they're showing up like full of what I know now is full of shame, and they're showing up eager to do the work and eager to like engage. And also they're showing up on certain days, like totally in their trauma. And like, what's going on with all of this? Like if I were to zoom out, what's the big picture of that's going on here? So it was definitely some stuff that I was reading that started to I guess, forced me to ask some questions about what I was seeing and in this lived experience of the veterans that I was working with.
And were you, or had you had any trauma experience or training in terms of how that's going to impact on the veterans?
0.0. No. I mean, this is this is the fault of the work in dietetics, in my opinion, is that we don't get any training around the impact of trauma on health. And so, no, it was really, I mean, I learned because obviously I'm in the VA, and obviously there are a lot of therapists and psychologists and a whole mental health department that is there to focus on trauma.
Yeah.
And there was a few psychologists that would work in our weight loss program, and they brought up the trauma stuff. So I was listening to them, really.
Right.
And we were doing groups together. So I was hearing, these veterans talk about their trauma and like being in it, like especially like around 4th of July, right? And hearing fireworks and things like that, where that it was just exposure to how the psychologists were talking about trauma, but I never really got any formal training or like that until I did the body trust work. And again, that's not really like trauma work. It's more like being trauma informed.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I mean, I haven't done any real official training on trauma. I've read a fair few books on it, but there's definitely a point where I'm like, okay, I know enough to have a conversation about this, but I'm not your trauma worker. Like, this is where I refer out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in terms of intuitive eating, like, talk about what that was like for you discovering intuitive eating, and like, how did your own personal eating start to morph or take that on board?
Yeah. So I originally had heard about the book in college when I was at doing my undergrad stuff, and I didn't really like pick up on it too much until I heard one of the co-authors, Elise Resch, speak here in LA. And after I heard her speak, I was like, I think I need to give this book another chance. And I reread it, and that's when like a lot of stuff just clicked. And I emailed her and I said, thank you for writing this book. It's great. I can understand how it's so profound and helpful for people, and just thank you. And she wrote back and said, thank you so much. I run a supervision group here in LA, and you're always welcome. We'd love to have you join. And it was and so I did. I went once a month, probably for about 2, 3, maybe 4 years, just on a really consistent basis. And that was really, like, to be honest, that was my work. Like, I just sort of listened and brought in some cases here and there, but like just listened to people as they were like talking about this. And that's where I started to really liberalize a lot of my food stuff and started to bring like a different lunch and started to think about, why can't I have sourdough bread? Why do I need to have wheat bread? I hate wheat bread. Like, sourdough is so much more yummy. Like, why can't I have it? And doing things like that really, I would say if I really like think about it, I would say like 4 to 5 years of like challenging all the very overt food rules, but also the subtle ones that were like way deep.
Yeah. And were you someone who had followed lots of official diets, or was more just sort of healthy eating in inverted commas, or I'm just trying to like have lower amounts of calories, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, it was really like, again, like when I was like in my mid-20s, it was really just like trying to watch the amount of calories I took in. It was really more focused on that. And I wouldn't say any like specific diet per se. And then once I was like in school becoming a dietitian, it was probably more focused on like maybe a little bit of calories and stuff, because I knew that here's what I knew about the science from an early point, and also lived experience, is that I knew, because I had lost so much weight as an adult, I knew that in order for me to maintain the weight loss that I had to be super strict.
Yeah.
And that I had to be super like vigilant, and I couldn't go over a certain number. And so that's the sort of food rule that sort of stuck for the most, and breaking that was hard.
And how was this experience in terms of discovering intuitive eating and changing your eating patterns with your partner, or she could have been wife by then? Like, what did they have a history around dieting? Was this something you guys did together? Like, how did that come together?
Yeah, no, my partner, she has her own food stuff and that she's done work on, and so when I started to do this intuitive eating stuff, it was like I was like, this is like, I think you got to read this book. And I can't remember if she has fully read it or not. I think she has, but I don't remember. I'm her husband. I'm not her dietitian. So that's a very clear distinction I make. Yeah. But she has been super supportive throughout all of this. And as I've like changed careers, changed trajectory of a career, super supportive, is like, yes, I see why this is going to be important for you. I'm going to be behind you 100%, and has never faltered in any way in that realm. And just, even as my body's changed, she has not cared. As our bodies change, like neither of us have cared. We each sort of know that food can be tricky for each of us, and we're just going to be there to support each other. And again, I'm not her dietitian. Yeah. And I told her from very early, like, I don't want to be your dietitian. This is going to be, and when I am, you get to say that. Yeah,
definitely. And you said kid, do you have children? 1, 2?
Yeah. I have twins. Okay. They just turned 12.
Okay, fine. And so how is it being in terms of raising them as eaters?
Yeah. It's being a dad is really hard. Being a parent's really hard. Being a dietitian and a parent is miserable. It's like if you're trying to get out of your head, right? I mean, you're trying to get out of that professional head and really instead like just realize, okay, my kid didn't have a vegetable for 2 days. It's okay. They're going to survive, right? I don't need to like do that thing that I know is not going to be helpful to like say, oh, you got to eat a vegetable today. So like I really had to like stand back and really just sort of honor that I'm going to be their dad. And I'm going to like model all the food stuff that I can. And I'm just going to help them develop their own positive relationship with food and trust their body. And that's going to look different than how I was raised and how I sort of knew how I thought I should do food, right? It was just very different, but it was great. Like now in the end, like I'm so like thankful that we did what we did with our kids, because they do have a fairly solid relationship with food and a fairly solid relationship with their body.
Yeah. Nice.
And just like your siblings, right? Their bodies are totally different. Like they're born on the same day, but they're totally different kids from a personality and body wise.
Yeah. And so I've got a 2-year-old son, and we have very much just from the beginning done the whole division of responsibility, where we prepare the food, we put it down in front of him. He has kind of like a buffet of food in front of him at every meal. Sure. And then once the food is on the table, my responsibility ends. And he then gets to choose what he wants to eat, how much of it that he wants to eat. At this stage, I think there's probably just a little bit more of him wanting to get out of his chair. So that's probably a little bit of a battle at the moment. But apart from that, and it is amazing how much there is just no stress. And look, undoubtedly that's going to change as he gets older, and there'll be things that come up. But I'm not at any point thinking like, please, why are you not eating your broccoli, or why are you not eating this or that? It's just like, I know he's going to start eating that at some point. And there's days where he just eats nothing but white rice, and there's days where he eats like more than me, and it's phenomenal to see someone that small put away that amount of food. And it is. I think they are just the most pure intuitive eaters.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think the way we just sort of thought about it is like, let's not get in the way, right? Yeah. Let's try and nurture that and not to mess it up, with by trying to intervene in some way.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I'm also the first to acknowledge, like, I have lots of privilege. I haven't had a dieting history. I've lived in a thinner body. Same with my partner. We've got the money and the means to buy nice food, and we have the time to cook meals and all of those things that make this process so much easier. But at the same time, there's a lot of people in that position who really do get in the way of trying to micromanage it with the best of intentions, where then meals become like a battleground.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to hear about the Body Trust certification. So I've had Dana on the podcast before, and it's a training that I personally want to do. I just, with having a child more recently and other stuff, it just hasn't happened. But maybe start with giving an overview. And I know you touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but an overview of what the training is, and then we can sort of dive into the bits that you really liked from it.
Yeah. Well, let me just first off say I'm not like a paid sponsor by them at all. It might sound like I am, but it's really just how much I love the work and how much it has meant to me. And so, like I sort of said earlier, to me, if I were to explain Body Trust and the certification, it's taking the paradigms of health at every size, intuitive eating as a foundation, but building upon those, this really focused social justice lens that's going to bring in topics like weight stigma, race, gender, privilege, social determinants of health, really looking at systems of oppression and how those have impacted health, and using a lot of other sort of feminist theories and trauma-informed care to help sort of bring all that together in how do we have conversations with folks around their body and externalizing the shame and blame that they might be living with, and understanding that all of these things like diet culture and like the need and strive to be thin is all things that you never consented to be a part of. These are all things that were sort of thrust upon you. And here's a different way of thinking about it. Your body has been with you for your entire life, has shown up for you in many different ways, no matter how you've treated it. And so let's start to rebuild that relationship with your body so that you end up trusting it the way, you probably started to do when you were a kid.
Right. Wow. Yeah, the part that I really like about it is, as you described there, like he's just touching on so many different areas. And for all of that, like how much of those did you think you knew or were strengths going into it? Yeah. And how much of that was just like, this is completely new stuff to me?
Yeah. So I definitely knew about intuitive eating, and I definitely knew about health at every size. I felt very comfortable with those. I felt mildly comfortable to moderately comfortable with weight stigma. I did not feel very comfortable with talking about other forms of oppression, though. And I think, as someone who exists in this world with also a lot of privilege, being cisgendered and heterosexual and white and having financial means, I have a lot of privilege in this world. And, that's a lens, that's a blinder in a lot of ways for me as I do this work. So the Body Trust work allowed me to really understand the biases that I have, understand why they're there, and how do I work on a personal level to dismantle those or challenge those on a daily basis, because they're going to show up in my office. Yeah. And some clients really don't like that I talk about it, and some clients love that I talk about social justice, and I talk about these things all the time because I feel like we have to. Like, I feel like in order to move this process along to help people really feel comfortable in their bodies, they need to understand why it's such a radical act, why everyone is saying this is not something you're allowed to do. And when you do it, you're really like being a rebel, right? And you need, and rebellions need like a community, right? Rebellions need the other rebels to sort of band together and say, I hear you. What you're saying is right. And I'm going to stand behind you in this fight. And I think that's what Body Trust did for me. It not only helped me bring that into the room, but it gave me a community of other providers who are out there doing this work, being radical, being revolutionary, saying things that are not popular, but we all have each other's back.
Yeah. And you said that some people don't like you talking about this, and maybe even some clients don't like you talking about this. For what's the reason that they don't like it?
Yeah. I've had clients who just say, listen, the social justice part doesn't resonate with me, and I don't see how it is relevant to our work, and have chosen to find other folks who might speak differently in their office, which I respect, right? And they almost every time that's happened, people have sort of been upfront about it with me, which is helpful. But I also notice it professionally. I'm getting to the point in my career where my outspokenness, some people feel is challenging, right? Maybe too challenging to sort of give a voice to, and sometimes that. There's like a ramification of that, right? Like of speaking your mind. So I sort of see it on both levels.
Right. And does it skew in the direction of the people who are most put off by it, or also the people who have the most privilege?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that the clients that have, I would say, if from a client standpoint, the folks that struggled with it, maybe it just wasn't like, I don't know. It just wasn't a part of what they already were coming in with, right? And it seemed, and especially in the United States, and I'm sure it sounds very similar right now in the UK. Politics is really an intense topic, and I feel like some people are really want to move forward in that, and some people are like, this is the one place I don't want politics to enter into my work. But I tell people bodies are political, and it's not like a red state, blue state, or Tory party, or or something else. I mean, we're talking who gets a voice, right? Which bodies are given more power and more of a voice? That's what I mean by political. And how do we raise up the voices that are marginalized? So I mean, I think that's where I've seen clients come up is I just don't. That doesn't land for me. I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want that to be a thing that we focus on.
Okay. And then the ones where it really does land, how do you think that's helping them in a way that you weren't able to do before? Is it about the language that they then have to use, or just this extra lenses that they're able to see the kind of the complexity through?
I think first thing is noticing holy shit, this stuff shows up everywhere. Yeah. I didn't realize it, but it's everywhere. So I think that's one piece. The other piece is, yes, for sure, language. It's oh, this is what that's called, right? When my doctor and when I come in for my flu shot and my doctor gives me a 15-minute lecture on weight loss, and after I get my flu shot, that's weight stigma, right? Oh, I can put a language to that. But I think the other thing that is really powerful is this work, this Body Trust work, I feel helps give people a voice and helps give them the tools to sort of stand up and say, you know what? I don't need a lecture for 15 minutes about weight loss right now. I need my flu shot, and then I'm going to leave. It's sort of like setting a boundary with friends and family. Can we not talk about bodies today? Can we not talk about your diet? I really want to hear how things are going in your life and in your work life, but I don't care about what foods you're eating. And it's maybe adding a voice to stand up and say I deserve a safe boundary on these topics. And if you can't accept that, then I'm going to have to really set firmer boundaries about who I let into my life now.
Yeah. And so you also said about the stigma, weight stigma piece, where you're like, I knew about it, but I think I learned more by doing this. So was it learning more in terms of the kind of damage that stigma can do, or the fact that it's just so ubiquitous in all parts of life? Like, what was it that you got out of that piece?
Yeah, I think it was, and I was looking, I know you have a podcast on the ACEs study.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big thing, is like tying in how, like, wow, someone who's been in a larger body has been traumatized, maybe their entire lives around this. And what is the health impact of that recurrent re-traumatization of the individual? And what is the health impact of weight stigma, and why are we not talking about this? So that was a huge piece. I think the other part was also very similar to like what my clients experience, is like sort of, Hillary and Dana have what I am most thankful to them is they model the work of trying to be inclusive and how hard that is. And inclusion work is there's no right way to do it. You're going to mess up. You're going to make mistakes, and you're gonna, you're gonna mess up. That's not the important thing. The important thing is, how can you do repair work, right? How can you listen? How can you sort of do the education for yourself to help understand other lived experiences? So when I went to this training, you spend a week with your cohort. It was really like amazing just to see like, oh, this is what like an inclusive space can look like, you know, and this is what it can feel like as an individual to be in an inclusive space. And so, it was really seeing with like firsthand, like, oh, this is how people are doing this work, what it really looks like when you actually try to apply that in a real world setting. Yeah.
And I think that the point that you said there about they're trying to do this work, it's messy, they're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Like, I think that's great. And I also feel like we're at a time where you say the wrong thing and you get jumped on, and it's almost like intentions don't matter. And so I think it is important to be able to create a space where people can try things out and they might make mistakes, and then that's okay, and they can then learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a very interesting time with regards to that, for sure.
Yeah. And I know, I think it's Dana who has like huge amounts of experience with motivational interviewing. So is that a big part of it as well?
Yes, there's a definitely like a really great like couple parts of our training that focus on motivational interviewing and how to do it. We talk a lot about empathy, how to like, what does empathy look like? Why do we struggle with it so much? So yes, there's a component to that as well.
Yeah. And was that something, was motivational interviewing something you had done training on before, or was that part of your practice?
Believe it or not, at the VA, they gave us a lot of MI work there that I was really like thankful for. So I felt like that was something that was already sort of planted. It's something that I continue to work at a lot, and it's really hard to do in a session. I sometimes obviously find myself in my head saying like, that's not like what I really need to say right now, right? I think I need to like stop and listen more than talk right now. Yeah. And so it's definitely something that I knew about, but it was continued to sort of develop with this body trust work, for sure.
Okay. I think I need to go back and check, but I have a feeling that motivational interviewing started fairly early in sort of working with veterans as part of how it was developed, or maybe I'm mixing that up with something else.
Maybe and they might have told us that, and I probably, because of the trauma of working at the VA, I probably forgot it.
Okay, fine. And then the work, because I know you work for like Center for Discovery. So talk a little bit about that, like what it is, what's the work that you do there.
Yeah. So I've been I started with them in like January of 2017, and I was really thankful. They approached me and we had some conversations about coming on board and helping develop a track in their outpatient facilities for binge eating disorder, and that was something that was really interesting to me. So that's when I joined, and I sort of helped, was one of the voices to sort of add, curriculum to that and help sort of launch that off the ground. And since then, I've, continued to just be a voice within that sort of track, but also a dietitian in their outpatient location, and hopefully transitioning into maybe a new different job to be like a sort of a HAES advisor to them as we continue to grow and do this work. But what I really appreciate from Center for Discovery is they're really trying to also do this inclusion work, which is challenging for a big company. To do this work there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of systems that need to be looked at, and how do we do it? But what I'm thankful for is there's a lot of folks internally that are really committed to this, and looking at like, how do we do this work around eating disorders, and how do we do it better, and also realize that, we're going to mess up too. And how do we learn to do repair work?
And you said that they reach out to you as part of the position. Was it because of your background in terms of health at every size and that skill set that you have there?
Actually, it was just, again, like this is a small world, and the one of the women who was running, she is the outpatient like director of the dietitians on the outpatient level. We were in Elise Resch's supervision group for intuitive eating together. And we had just sort of stayed connected, and we were just talking, and it was like, she was like, hey, there might be this job open. Would you be interested? I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So it was really just sort of like a friendly conversation that led to, eventually getting a job.
And you said you're trying to bring the health at every size into there. So how are they with that at the moment? Where were they when you first started?
Well, really the reason I joined was because it wasn't just me who was talking about these things. There were many other dietitians, psychologists. They had members of ASDA, the Association for Size Diversity in Health, board members like within the company. So there were a lot of folks across the company who were sort of HAES advocates, and really trying to bring this message in, and sort of they just needed like to add another voice, really. And so I was really excited to join because there were already some people already talking about this and already wanting to do some of this. So it was by no means something that I brought to them. It was already there, and people were already doing this work. And what it looks like now is really trying to help Center for Discovery look at really everything, how we're doing from an eating disorder perspective around food and body image, and trying to sort of look at it from a HAES perspective and say, what do we need to change? Like, in a perfect world, what would we do differently?
Yeah.
How would we do it? And then how do we help people actually like do it? Right. And realizing with a big company, it's not about me at all, right? Like I'm just one person. Like it's about the person who has the day-to-day interaction with the client. And that could be anyone from the dietitian, the therapist, the facility manager, the counselor who's helping them overnight. If they're in a residential setting, it's, the diet tech who might be serving them or plating a meal with them. It's like, it's everyone, right? It's the psychiatrist that's talking to them about their meds. It's the doctor or the nurse who's checking vitals. I mean, it's like, it's the multitude of people that you need to have on board. That's the challenge. But I think we're really interested in how do we like do some trainings that really help people understand what this is about.
And is that pretty much how it's then going to be integrated in terms of let's then re-educate the people that are here through various trainings?
Ideally, and it's also sort of like, I think what we're also thinking about is, if we're going to sort of commit to being a truly Hays company, how do we recruit people, right? How do we find other Hays people out there and really make that sort of a part of the philosophy of recruiting people, right? So that when people are hired, they know that this is something we're doing, and that. So, but it's also just like, I don't know, Chris, it's like, it's even like the small day-to-day things about like, are these meal plans like, is there weight bias showing up in how we do these meal plans?
Yeah.
Is there weight bias showing up in how we do some of these group activities? It's really like, the rabbit hole goes deep. Yeah. There's a lot of work. But what's sort of nice is like we get to, we're getting a lot of freedom and a lot of autonomy to try and really do this in a real way. And I think if we can prove that it can be done within such a large corporation, I think it's going to have a huge ripple effect in the eating disorder community.
Definitely. I mean, is there any pushback from people there? Because I know it can sometimes feel like everyone's on board with this and you get into the little bubble of the world that we live in, but obviously not everyone thinks in this way. So are there people at Center for Discovery that are like, I think this is a mistake, this isn't what we should be doing?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that, there's healthy skepticism, right? Yeah. Like from,
which is not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, right? And I think what we're trying to make space for is how do we have these conversations internally, and so that we don't confuse the client or we don't traumatize the client. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that we want. Listen, I want healthy skepticism. That's fine. Like I'm always down to have a conversation about why you might not be on board with this way of working with our clients. I'm also completely open to hearing why, as long as you can also hear me about why we need to do this, right? Yeah. And why it is so important. And I think I'm open to dialogue with folks about this for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that I want to see more of people being able to have conversations around this, about saying, okay, well, but what about in this case, or this is where this thing breaks down, or I think this is overreaching a little bit, where it doesn't just become like an ideology. Mm-hmm. But look, I want to definitely chat about like working with men. As I said at the beginning, like this isn't something that I've got much experience with, and it's not something I spend a lot of time chatting about on the podcast, but I do think it's really important. So just as a starter, like how much of your client base would be male versus female, if I'm just using that kind of binary distinction?
I will push back on the binary distinction and say, no, it's okay. Is just to say, I would say of my current like sort of folks that I see, those that are male and identify as male are probably, I would say 30%. Okay. Plus or minus. And it's not something I like outwardly specialize in. I have a lot of folks who don't want to work with me because I'm male. I have a lot of folks who want to work with me because I'm male, and some people who really don't care. So what let me just say this, because the conversation comes up around, because I'm one of the, there aren't many of us who are male dietitians and who come from a Hays perspective, right? There's a handful of us. I get asked about male body image and doing work with males all the time. And my answer is sort of this, is, it's different, but it's also not. It's a lot. If you can be empathetic and hear someone's lived experience that you might not have had your own, right? That you don't identify with, but you can empathize with, and you can listen to, and you can see the problems and the issues, and be just a compassionate person towards, you can work with anyone.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same skill. we're really trying to create a safe space where someone can explore what these feelings are and where their own safety is in their body. The thing that is maybe going to be nuanced is that for especially maybe some of the cisgendered men that I work with that have a lot of privilege also in life, is that they're just not used to talking about a topic that is maybe might marginalize them. They don't know what maybe some of that marginalization might feel like in some sense, right? So if they're in a larger body, they're like, I guess I don't have privilege there, but like I don't know how to sort of identify that as a marginalization, right? Because they've had so much privilege in many other ways. So I think it's just making space for like building language around body image, and like this is what this feeling we can tie to this word, right? And sort of connecting some of those dots about how weight ideals, body ideals, what is considered masculine, what's not, how those have come in to our thinking. Same way diet culture has. You didn't ask for it. No one asked if this is how you wanted to, live your life. It's just sort of like, this is what you do. Here's how you should be. And then sort of using that same framework to sort of help people dismantle and externalize the blame that they might be feeling or the shame they might be feeling around their body.
Yeah. And look, I think you're right in terms of I don't have any fear about doing the work with a man, and I would feel very comfortable being in that space because you're right, the skill set is still the same of being able to have a conversation with someone and be compassionate and have empathy and be a good listener and all of that. And at the same time, I'm just aware that I don't know what I don't know, and there's going to be things where there is certain nuance, or there are going to be things where there are certain differences that I just haven't been exposed to because I haven't worked with that subset of the population that is male, that is going through an eating disorder or is going through body image struggles that might be just more specific or just something I haven't come across.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that. And I think the biggest nuance that I'm seeing is like how to address or how to help folks really land with self-compassion. And seeing self-compassion as a necessary tool and as a healing tool, and not as a sign of weakness or giving up, or even like they might even like associate with like femininity, right? Like especially like cisgendered men, like really sort of like being afraid of like, well, doesn't this make me like, I don't know, this is something like my wife could do, but I can't do. It's sort of challenging that. And I think that's a really great nuanced place to spend time with clients is like, how do we think about self-compassion from that perspective? When you've been taught for years, just rub some dirt on it, get back in the game, right? Like suck it up. No pain, no gain. You push through what you need to push through and you don't stop.
Yeah. And does the self-compassion piece then also extend to self-care, where like talking about that or focusing on that feels more feminine and it feels like something that they can't do?
Not really, to be honest. It's more like, I hear that. Like I would say the example that comes up probably most often is like, I know I shouldn't be doing X. I am doing it. I wish I wasn't. And then sort of then adding to the conversation, okay, but like, how can we bring in self-compassion to this, right? Instead of shame, instead of blame, how can we make space for self-compassion that maybe, this behavior is maybe the best you could do right now. Yeah. Right. It's not perfect, but like it's the best you could have done right then. And there's wisdom in your body's coping. And, this is if we can sort of make space for that, how does that help you move forward instead of like staying in the cycle of I'm wrong, I'm broken, I'm just not working hard enough, all that stuff. And that piece of saying like, I'm just doing the best I can right now is really sometimes challenging for folks.
Okay, definitely. And then are there areas where like men struggle with body image is different to women?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for, the cisgendered men that I'm working with, that it's one is there's not a lot of people talking about it. So like, they're not hanging out with their friends and they're not talking about their body, and they're not talking about how uncomfortable they are with their body. They're not talking about like other like men that might be out in the community, like having these conversations as someone to like aspire to, right? So there's no like sort of role model out there who is being brave in these conversations. So there's not a lot of representation that they might see. There aren't a lot of books on the topic. So it's really like just lack of resources that show up that, I don't. It's great that I can talk about this with someone, but like I've never had this conversation outside of this space.
Yeah. And because when I think of women, or even maybe a slight caricature of women, it's they can all talk about how much they hate their bodies to one another, and there's almost like this camaraderie around not liking their body and a way of showing vulnerability around that. But I mean, at least with the guys that I know, that doesn't translate to what guys typically would talk about.
Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned or made reference to like body standards for men. Like what are some of the unrealistic standards men have? Because I mean, the first thing I think of when I'm thinking of that kind of topic would be like porn or men's health. But yeah, I mean, how does that also feed into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two big influences, and I also would say sports. Seeing athletes' bodies is a big influence. Marvel movies, superhero movies are going to be an influence also. I think it's really, but I think it's also like this idea of, especially for some of the men I talk to who are especially as they age, it's like I used to be like I could do everything, right? Yeah. I used to be able to like go out, play football, come home, then play a game of basketball, then go run, then like do everything, and nothing like was hard, right? And now like just doing, getting off and going for a walk hurts.
Yeah.
And there's that thing of like, this is what my body used to be. And because I've never really developed sustainable behaviors, I don't do any of that stuff anymore. And I'm like grieving that I'm older and that my body's changed. So I think it's interesting, like our own personal our own personal body experience, like of now getting older and being like, oh man, I'm just not 18 anymore and I can't do the things I used to do when I was 18.
And for those clients, because that's almost part of their identity of I'm the guy who can go and play a whole range of sports and it's not going to affect me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And what about, I mean, you may be referencing when you said sports, but like just gym culture more generally, like is that a big impact?
It's interesting. Not as many of the clients I'm currently seeing. I mean, I definitely think it's an impact. Yes. And I think, it definitely shows up. I feel like just my current folks that I'm working with, that's not a huge topic that's coming up. It's actually a topic that's coming up with a lot of the female identified clients that I have.
Okay.
Gym culture showing up and that, but no, definitely, it's interesting. I would love to work or like get some experience with men who are like gym rats, right? Who are like constantly in the gym and pushing their body in a way that like might be unsustainable, right? But they're like, no, if I just got to work through it. But I don't have those clients.
You mean in terms of like bigorexia or that kind of thing?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Fine. And I know you run like specifically men's group. So what are you talking about as part of this, or how do you facilitate them?
Yeah. So it's a 6-week group, and I use Body Trust curriculum. And so, we go through each week, and we have different topics that focus around body trust principles. So it's, we touch on intuitive eating, we touch around ideas of health at every size, but we also, talk about other aspects that would help them sort of develop those sustainable behaviors that are around self-compassion and around having more empathy and curiosity around their lived experience, rather than trying to create this cycle of fixing problem solving with their body.
Yeah. And with the men that you're working with, how many of them would be or have received a diagnosis for eating disorders?
It's a good question. And here's the thing. I would, formal diagnosis, right? I would say it's probably a third, maybe a little bit higher.
Okay.
But I would also say that maybe more would have eating disorders. It's just they haven't been diagnosed, and that's a whole nother conversation about why men with eating disorders are not being screened properly, are not being diagnosed, are never being even considered for having an eating disorder because of our biases in the community.
Yeah. So, talk more about that, because I was thinking about this. Is there a stigma because it's almost seen like this isn't a male thing? And I know how ridiculous that is, but that's the perception.
Well, I think there's still that for sure. I think, there are still not, there are some questionnaires, but I don't know if they're validated or used very often, but all the validated sort of questionnaires are still skewed towards women, still skewed towards restrictive eating disorders. So, where men might not answer some of these questions because it's not an issue for them. And then they're sort of oh, well, you don't have an eating disorder because you didn't come up on the screen. Right. But I think it's also, we don't see, listen, when you talk about the gym culture and bigorexia and these folks who are super restrictive with their eating, right? And then binging on certain days and obsessed with the gym and et cetera, et cetera. I think if we were to take gender out of that, we would see a lot of eating disorder behaviors, and our red flag would go up much higher. And so I think we really are looking at, because of our biases, we're really sort of pulling the wool over our eyes that a lot of people are struggling with eating disorders, but we just think they're being healthy.
Meaning because potentially because of how the male body works physically, there doesn't have this outward appearance of having an eating disorder the way that it potentially could for a woman.
Exactly. We don't see them this person is not thin or dangerously thin.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not a red flag. They're just doing something that seems culturally okay. And so, they don't look sick, so they must not be.
Yeah. And I think as well with the language, I can't remember the article. I think it was talking about the Dorsey, the guy from Twitter, and his Jack Dorsey, I think. I might be getting his name wrong, but yeah, who is the head of Twitter, who has what I would say is a fairly complicated relationship with food, but within sort of the tech male spaces, you change the language and it then becomes like a superpower in terms of, oh, I'm doing biohacking, or I'm doing this thing for longevity, or and you add some sciencey sounding language to it and you dress it up. And actually, it's just the same destructive behaviors that women have been doing for a very long time.
Exactly. I think that's, the folks who developed Soylent is under the same thing, right? They developed this thing so that if I'm coding, right, I don't want to get up and go eat. So I'm going to get this, probably horrible. I've never had it, right? But probably horrible to average tasting drink that has everything I need, right? And I'm just going to drink it so I can stay coding, right? It's the friggin' Matrix, right? Where they like spit out this gruel and they're like, oh, it's got all the amino acids your body needs, and some people even think it tastes like chicken. It's like, oh my God, is this where we're evolving to? Like, let's have food that tastes really friggin' good and eat the damn friggin' good food.
Yeah, definitely. And so you said before that there's not a lot of good resources in this space in terms of books for men or resources for men. But have you found any that have been useful either for you personally or for the guys in the group?
One of the I'm going to be honest, it's probably one of the hardest books someone's going to read, but it's probably the best too, is a book called Manhood. And it is a series of pictures and essays. The pictures are of men's penises. It's 100 men and people who identify as men, all different body types, all different ages, and then an essay about their penis or about like masculinity. And it is awesome. I'm telling you, there's some men that are going to look at me like, I'm not reading a book, the penis book, but like, and that was me too. But like when I read it, and reading these stories, it really helps sort of synthesize why, masculinity and this idea of like, what is masculine, how flawed that, or how problematic that can be for us as we develop, right? It talks a lot about porn culture. It talks a lot about sort of feeling inadequate, and not feeling like man enough.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting group of essays to put together to give a lived experience of what it's like to be male and identify as male in this world.
And is it a book that you would also recommend for females? Because I read a lot of books that are aimed at a female audience where I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm so happy I read this. Like, this helps me in life a lot. Like, would you say it also, it does for both?
So the woman who did it, she's from the UK, and all of the men who participated are from the UK.
Okay.
She did a book first with women, and it's a picture of their breasts.
Okay.
So if the one about the males is not maybe off-putting to women, right? There's one for women that she did. I think it's called Womanhood. I'd have to look it up.
Okay, cool. That sounds really interesting. I just finished reading Sarah Pascoe's book. I think it's called Sex, Money, Power. She's a stand-up comedian over here. She's done a book called Animal, and then she did this other book called Sex, Money, Power. And it looks at porn, the sex industry. It looks at the biology around sex and our desire to have sex from the male perspective and the female perspective. And it's really interesting. But one of the things she talked about is just the difference in porn in terms of the general population. So I think the average male penis is 6 inches. In porn, it's 12 inches. And how for so many men, this is just a real struggle. And when she started to look into it and explore it, it's not even about like, I think I'm going to be better in bed or my partner's going to like it more, because a lot of the time people are told like that's going to make absolutely no difference. But it's almost like the judgment of other men that gets into people's head more than anything else, which I just found was really fascinating in terms of that perspective.
Yeah, no, totally. So just going back, the author of that book, her name is Laura Dodsworth.
Yeah.
And it's called Manhood, A Bare Reality. And then she did one called Bare Reality, and it was about 100 women. And then she did another one called Womanhood, The Bare Reality. So Laura Dodsworth is who you want to check out.
Okay, cool. Well, I will order all three. Yeah. And I also know, like, you've been doing work with Rachel Milner to support other practitioners. So, talk a little bit about this.
So Rachel Milner is another Body Trust provider, and we've become great friends through this work.
Did you do it at the same time as you did?
No, she was cohort 1. I'm cohort 2. And, cohort 1 sort of lords it all over all of us, right? That they were the OG folks. No, so we met through this work, and then we talk a lot on a regular basis. And one of the things that just came up is so many folks come to this work because of their own eating disorder history. And none of us are perfect. So many people will relapse. Where are the folks who are relapsing going for support? And the reality is nowhere. They don't want to go to treatment with other folks who they might know, right? Might have treated or whatever. So there's a lot of stigma around that. There's not a lot of acceptance in our community for people when they are struggling, but they are going to struggle. So we were like, let's create this group where people we're just going to offer a support group to anyone who's a eating disorder clinician. And it doesn't matter where they are in their process, but they're allowed to show up to our group, and we're going to support them, and the group's going to support them. And it's been great. We started it in July, and we're in our sort of second round of doing it. And it's truly amazing how much of a healing space, these folks need. And it's just, we're thankful to offer it.
Yeah. Cause I've definitely talked on the podcast before about worries with people who've recently had eating disorders and have recovered, who then dive straight into becoming dietitians and nutritionists and are like the problems that can then create when people aren't fully recovered. But as you say, like, just because someone is quote unquote fully recovered doesn't mean that there isn't going to be something at some point later in their life that can knock them off that perch and things start to come up again. And you're right, like, where does someone have to go? And especially if you're doing work with other folks around this stuff, like, to then have to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm struggling with this myself. If you've been someone who has promoted full recovery, like, that can really feel like, I don't know, a slap in the face, and you don't want to be doing that.
Yeah. And I think one of the discussions I hope that what we have as a community is, what word are we going to use to talk about as we get better? Some people are like fully recovered. Some people like in recovery. I'll be honest, I don't like either. And just because neither land with me, and I think I want to make more space for, again, the human experience that if you struggled with this, you're going to be triggered. Things are going to pop up, and something's going to happen in your life where it might be, sort of front and center again. And I think that's just how life is. And to sort of put a label on it where you're like, oh no, I'm past this, can create, I think it creates more shame when we do struggle.
Yeah. And it's a really tough one, because I can see the benefits of both in terms of and I can see the problems with both, like saying that someone has to be in recovery for now the rest of their life and comparing it to I don't know, alcohol or drug addiction or something like that can feel like not great, when people are like, no, but I feel like I can get to a place where this is no longer a thing. And there's a lot of people with lived experiences where that's how it completely feels for them. And for them to have to constantly say, no, I'm in recovery, I don't know, somewhat invalidates that. But I also see, as you're talking about, that then creates a problem, because it's then, well, if I'm meant to be fully recovered, I'm not. Like, what does that say about me? Or what does that say about my recovery journey? Or what does that say about where I'm at?
Right. So just like gender, right? We have all these words for the spectrum, right? Maybe we need a whole spectrum of words.
Yeah. It's not up to you to pick one, but do you have one that you've been using as a stopgap?
No, I really haven't. And that's a great question. I sort of I want to come up with something. I want something to, to sort of I would love to sort of say, hey, here's my idea of what of a word. The phrase I'm using a lot is with my clients, and just like I put some stuff on Instagram and whatever, but like is I want people to recover into bravery, not safety. Right. So don't eat the safe foods, eat the brave foods, and the other thing I tell people is I want you to eat with full Technicolor brilliance. Right. I don't want you to eat like drab, sort of gray, boring food. And it doesn't have to be black or white either. Like I want you to eat like the full spectrum of colors when it comes to food, as an experience, right? Not as like eat the rainbow, right? But like as an experience, and all of those colors can represent a different sort of influence, right? That why we choose foods, right? Yeah. And so just eat with that Technicolor brilliance.
Nice. And so with the group that you're doing with Rachel, like what is the focus of it? Like, are you then trying to offer support so that people can then find other support, or it's talking about what it's like to be a practitioner that's going through this, or what's the focus?
It's really like a support group in nature. It's whatever the participants check in with, we're here to support them through. So, if it's something that's come up professionally, we can talk about it. If it's something personally that they're struggling with, we make space for sort of all of it. And whatever, we don't really have a set agenda each week. It's whatever a participant is going to want to discuss, we make space for.
Okay, nice. Well, look, this has been a really wonderful conversation. I'm just wondering, is there anything else we haven't chatted about or haven't asked you about that you wanted to cover?
No, I mean, I think we covered all of some really important stuff, and I'm really thankful that I get to share all this information with your listeners. So, no, I'm really happy with what we talked about.
Perfect. Well, look, where can people be finding you if they want to find out more information? I mentioned at the top Dietitians Unplugged, which I recommend people checking out. But yeah, where else can they be going to get more information on you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and my handle is @Flores, RDN, registered dietitian nutritionist is what RDN stands for. And then my website is smashtheweightriarchy.com, and that's where you can just learn about my practice. I work with clients virtually, so if people are not in LA and want to work with me, they can always check out, get some information from my website.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you for coming on the show, and as I said, for chatting about things that I often don't get to cover. It was really good.
Thank you, Chris. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.